There's something strange about the way we live today. We say we want freedom, confidence, inner peace, but we spend most of our time editing ourselves to fit in. We second-guess our thoughts before we speak. We dress to impress people we don't even like, and we shape our lives around opinions that shift by the hour. Marcus Aurelius once said, "We love ourselves more than other people, but for some reason we care about their opinion more than our own." That was written nearly 2,000 years ago, and yet here we are, still trapped by the same invisible chains. The Stoics weren't immune to this struggle, but they developed tools, real, practical strategies for breaking free. Not by isolating themselves from the world, but by learning how to walk through it without being ruled by it. That's what we're diving into today. If you've been held back by fear of judgment, if you've been playing small to keep others comfortable, this video is your permission slip to stop and start living on your terms. If you value content that challenges conventional thinking and gives you something real to work with, there's one simple, free way to support what we're doing here. Just tap that subscribe button. It helps more than you think. Now let's get into it. 12 Stoic strategies that will help you stop caring what doesn't matter and start focusing on what truly does. 1. Question the rules you've been given. Let's be honest. Most of us walk through life on autopilot, following rules we didn't write, chasing standards we never questioned. Think about it. So much of what we label as normal was defined centuries ago by people we'll never meet, in a world that barely resembles the one we live in today. Traditions, social codes, reputations, appearances. We inherit them like hand-me-down clothes. We rarely stop to ask, who decided this? And why am I still following it? That's the kind of question the Stoics loved. They weren't afraid to look ridiculous if it meant being free. And perhaps no one embodied that spirit better than Diogenes the cynic. Now, Diogenes wasn't your typical philosopher. He didn't sit in ivory towers crafting abstract theories. No, he lived in a barrel. He owned almost nothing, and he walked backwards into crowded spaces, begged from statues, and deliberately broke social codes, not to shock, but to train his mind to ignore the approval of others. His goal wasn't rebellion for its own sake. It was something much deeper, self-mastery. He wanted to prove to himself that dignity doesn't come from blending in. It comes from standing firm in who you are, no matter who's watching. It's a radical idea, especially in a culture like ours, where conformity is rewarded and difference is often punished. But it's also liberating. You don't have to become a barefoot ascetic or live off the grid to benefit from Diogenes' approach. Start small. Challenge one expectation. Say something honest, even if it makes you stand out. Wear something you like, not something you're supposed to. Turn off your filter just long enough to see what happens. What you'll likely discover is that the fear of judgment is far louder than the judgment itself. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living," and part of that examination is looking at the unspoken rules we live by. Who are you when no one's watching? More importantly, who are you pretending to be when they are? The Stoics would say that living for the approval of the crowd is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. Their antidote? A kind of practiced indifference, a trained resistance to flattery, ridicule, and the empty opinions of the mob. Carl Jung put it in psychological terms when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that kind of authenticity doesn't happen by accident. It takes courage, it takes practice, and sometimes it takes walking backward into a crowd just to remind yourself that the world won't collapse if you stop performing. 2. Get comfortable being misunderstood. There's a strange kind of power in choosing discomfort on purpose, not because you're trying to suffer, but because you're trying to train yourself to get stronger mentally and emotionally. Most of us avoid discomfort like it's a disease. We edit our words, we hide our opinions, we follow trends we don't even like, just to stay invisible, just to avoid that sting of judgment. But here's the truth, the Stoics understood deeply. If you're afraid to be judged, you'll always be controlled by the crowd. Take Cato. He wasn't just a Roman senator. He was a living embodiment of Stoic values. When everyone else was wearing crisp white togas, Cato showed up in dark, rough clothing. No tunic, no shoes. He wasn't poor, he wasn't out of style. He was making a choice. He wanted to feel the discomfort, the stares, the whispered comments. Why? Because if you can face small judgments willingly, you'll be ready for bigger ones when they come. Cato believed that if you could train yourself to be okay with looking foolish in public, then no insult, no public opinion, no gossip could shake your core. And that's the kind of inner strength Stoicism aims for. It's not about building walls, it's about building resilience. You become unshakable by facing what shakes you, not by running from it. Plato once said, "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." And what is that light? It's being fully seen, fully yourself. No filter, no pretense. But to stand in that light, you have to first be willing to look different, to risk being misunderstood, and yes, even ridiculed. Carl Jung offered something similar from a psychological angle. He said, "Shame is a soul-eating emotion." And he was right. That fear of standing out, of asking the wrong thing, of wearing the wrong thing, of being the only one who disagrees, it eats away at you slowly. It keeps you quiet when you want to speak. It keeps you still when you want to move. But you don't need to be Cato marching barefoot through the forum to practice this. You can start with small acts. Post an opinion that's honest instead of popular. Say, "I don't know," when everyone's pretending they do. Ask the so-called dumb question in the meeting. Go out wearing what you like, not what's trending. Socrates was known for walking barefoot and asking uncomfortable questions that made people squirm. He didn't do it to be rebellious. He did it to seek truth. Because truth doesn't live where comfort is. It lives where growth happens, and growth is always just past your comfort zone. Every time you allow yourself to be seen as weird, awkward, or different, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. And once you stop needing to be liked by everyone, you unlock the ability to be fully yourself. Not everyone will get it. Not everyone will agree, but the ones who do, they'll respect the real you, not the version you edited for approval. 3. You're not the center of their world. There's a funny illusion most of us carry, like we're on some giant stage and the whole world is watching our every move. Every awkward moment, every misstep, every stain on our shirt or crack in our voice. We think it's all being closely judged and remembered. But the truth? Most people are too busy worrying about their own performance to pay attention to yours. This idea feels so obvious once you hear it, yet it's surprisingly hard to live by. That's why the Stoics practiced it deliberately. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once walked through the bustling Athenian marketplace with a pot of lentil soup. Not an impressive or dignified act, just a quiet, strange task. And when his teacher suddenly broke the pot, spilling the soup all over him, Zeno froze, humiliated. The crowd must have laughed, maybe whispered, but his teacher just smiled and said, "See, nobody cares." A brutal lesson, but a powerful one. That moment wasn't about embarrassment. It was about perspective. It was about breaking the illusion that everyone is watching. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." And if what we repeatedly do is obsess over what others think, we slowly lose touch with who we are. We become more concerned with performance than with purpose. The Stoics challenged this mindset by forcing themselves to experience small embarrassments, not avoid them. Because once you face the fear of judgment, you realize it's mostly smoke and mirrors. Carl Jung once wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." In modern terms, many of our anxieties come from the effort we put into avoiding discomfort, especially social discomfort. We'd rather silence ourselves, shrink, pretend, just to avoid the feeling of being exposed. But what if we leaned into that discomfort instead? What if we welcomed it, like the Stoics did, as training for real strength? Socrates wasn't popular in his time. He was mocked, criticized, eventually executed for asking inconvenient questions and refusing to pretend. But he understood that truth requires courage, and part of that courage comes from realizing the world doesn't revolve around you. Not in a harsh way, but in a freeing way. If people aren't watching you as closely as you think, you're free to take risks, free to learn in public, free to stumble, recover, and grow without shame. So many people are paralyzed by the fear of looking foolish. But the irony is that this fear makes us more fragile, more anxious, more hesitant. When you live like everyone is watching, you end up performing your life instead of living it. But when you finally realize, deeply, that no one is really watching that closely, that's when you start to move with freedom. Plato believed that knowledge begins in wonder, but wonder requires vulnerability. You can't ask honest questions if you're too afraid to look uninformed. You can't grow if you're obsessed with appearances. The Stoics knew this, which is why they practiced detachment not just from things, but from reputation. 4. Own what makes you different. Somewhere along the way, many of us started believing that being different was a problem to fix, not a strength to protect. We were taught quietly and consistently to blend in, to soften our edges, to stay inside the lines, fit the mold, follow the script, don't stand out. But here's the irony. Everything meaningful you admire in others, originality, bravery, authenticity, only exists because someone chose to stand apart. The Stoics didn't just accept this idea, they lived it. Take Agrippinus, a Roman philosopher during the reign of Nero. He was known for his calm defiance, his quiet courage, and one particular line that has echoed through the centuries. "I am the red thread in a white tunic." He wasn't ashamed of standing out. He embraced it. While others bowed to power or clung to conformity to stay safe, Agrippinus chose to be who he was, even if it made him a target. That's not rebellion for show. That's character in action. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." But in a world driven by trends and approval, authenticity is its own kind of power. Your story, your quirks, your lived experience, those aren't obstacles to overcome. They're your competitive edge. They're what make you you. And yet, we often trade them for acceptance. We shrink the parts of us that don't fit the norm, hoping it'll make life easier. But that's a slow erosion of the soul. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not a copy, not a diluted version, but the real, messy, vibrant you. That privilege, though, comes with a price: discomfort. You'll be misunderstood, laughed at, dismissed. But the Stoics would say, good, that's the test. If you're living by your values, standing firm in who you are, then criticism is just proof you're not lost in the crowd." Socrates was a living example of this principle. He questioned what others accepted, and in doing so he stood apart. Not because he wanted to be difficult, but because he refused to be dishonest. He saw the danger of a life spent conforming, how it leads to silence, to apathy, to decay of the soul. Socrates taught that a well-lived life is one that answers to truth, not trend. So let me say this plainly: Your weirdness isn't a weakness. Your past isn't a problem. Your voice, your vision, your values, those are your signature. When you try to erase them to fit in, you lose more than identity. You lose freedom. You lose meaning. You become forgettable in a world that desperately needs difference. 5. Stop asking for permission. Sometimes the loudest voices aren't coming from the world around us. They're echoing from the people closest to us. Family, friends, teachers, authority figures, people who love us, people who raised us, people who mean well, but still don't see the vision we're trying to build. And that's one of the hardest things in life, choosing between the life you were expected to live and the one you're meant to create. Florence Nightingale knew this tension better than most. Born into wealth, status, and privilege, she was expected to live a quiet, refined life. No working, no sweating, no sacrifice, certainly no nursing. In her time, nursing was seen as dirty, disgraceful, unfit for a woman of her background. But something in her spirit rebelled. She felt called to serve, to lead, to heal. And that internal voice, what some might call purpose, kept whispering. Eventually, it demanded a question. Are you going to let their opinions stop you from your purpose? That's not just a historical anecdote. That's a question we all need to confront. Because the truth is, we all carry invisible chains. Expectations, guilt, fear of disappointing the people we love. And so, we compromise, we stay quiet, we take the safe job, say the right things, chase approval instead of truth. But, as the Stoics would say, what good is safety if it costs you your soul? Epictetus taught that if you want to improve, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. He didn't just mean by strangers, he meant by the people you care about. Growth often requires friction. Not because you're trying to fight the world, but because you're trying to free yourself from the parts of it that don't serve you anymore. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." Sometimes the voice holding you back isn't your own. It's a dream someone else handed you. And while it may have come from love, it's not yours. You get one life. One. And you cannot live it fully while dragging someone else's expectations behind you like a shadow. Socrates warned against living an unexamined life. But it's not just about asking big questions. It's about making hard choices. It's about being honest, painfully honest, about what you want and what you're willing to risk for it. Because walking your own path might upset people. It might confuse them. It might even hurt. But denying that path, that hurts you, quietly, slowly, deeply. 6. Protect what you actually control. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop trying to control what you never could in the first place. Most people spend their lives chasing approval, likes, validation, waiting for the world to clap before they believe in what they're doing. But that's a dangerous way to live. Because if you tie your self-worth to how people respond, you'll constantly be at the mercy of things you can't control. The Stoics knew this trap well. They built their entire philosophy on one powerful idea: focus on what's up to you, let go of the rest. You can control your effort, your attitude, your values. That's your domain. But you can't control how people interpret your actions. You can't control the algorithm. You can't force people to understand your vision. And honestly, that's not your job. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. That means you don't aim for applause. You aim for consistency, for excellence, for showing up, even when no one's watching, even when the results aren't instant. Carl Jung echoed this in his own way when he wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." If you're always looking outward, toward likes, toward followers, toward applause, you'll lose sight of the one thing that truly matters. the work itself, the act of creating, the discipline of doing. Socrates taught that virtue is its own reward. And he was right. When you pour yourself into something with integrity, when you show up fully and give your best, you've already won. The outcome is noise. The process is everything. 7. Ask, who's talking? It's strange how quickly a single comment can ruin your day. One insult, one passive-aggressive jab, and suddenly your mind is spinning, replaying the words, trying to figure out how to respond, or worse, how to fix yourself. But before you let that voice get under your skin, it's worth asking, who exactly is this person I'm giving so much power to? The Stoics had a simple rule: don't blindly accept the judgment of others. Examine it, question it, and above all, ask if it's worth anything. Marcus Aurelius advised himself, get inside the mind of the one who criticizes you. What are their values? What do they believe in? Often, you'll find their judgment says more about them than it does about you. Plato once said, opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance, and most criticism lives in that messy middle, loud, vague, and unqualified. So why take it so seriously? Would you take medical advice from someone who's never opened a book? Would you let someone who's never built anything tear down what you've built with a careless opinion? Carl Jung pointed out that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That includes our sensitivity to criticism. Sometimes we react so strongly, not because what was said is true, but because we haven't yet built the inner clarity to dismiss it. Socrates taught that wisdom begins with knowing what you don't know, and that includes knowing who doesn't deserve a seat at the table of your self-worth. Not all feedback is equal. Not all opinions carry weight. Your job isn't to please everyone. It's to discern which voices deserve your attention and which ones should be left in silence. 8. Pull back and see the bigger picture. We spend so much time trying to matter, trying to leave a mark, be remembered, stay relevant. But step back for a moment, zoom out. 100 years from now, will anyone remember what you posted today, or how many followers you had this month? Probably not. And if they do, will it even matter to you by then? The Stoics were obsessed with this kind of perspective. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled over one of the greatest empires in history, constantly reminded himself, fame is a clacking of tongues, legacy fades, dust settles over every name eventually. He even wrote that Alexander the Great and his mule driver met the same end, buried in the same earth, their differences meaningless in death. Carl Jung once said, life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. Its true life is invisible, hidden in the root. In other words, what's deep and real can't always be seen. That's why Stoicism teaches us not to build our identity on applause or image, not because it's wrong to be liked, but because it's dangerous to need it. Socrates told his students to care more about the state of their soul than their reputation, because reputation is fragile. It can be taken, twisted, forgotten, but who you are, that's yours. That's what you carry when the lights are off and the crowd is gone. Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia, a kind of deep flourishing that comes not from status, but from a life lived with purpose, reason, and virtue. And you don't get that by chasing trends. You get it by looking up, thinking bigger, asking better questions about what really lasts. 9. Public approval is an empty currency. It's easy to mistake attention for achievement, to think that applause equals impact or that likes measure value. But pause for a second, strip it down. What is applause really? Just hands hitting together. What's a like? A half-second tap, probably while someone's half watching something else. These signals feel big in the moment, but they're hollow if we make them the goal. The Stoics warned against this kind of distraction. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about praise, reminding himself that it's fleeting and shallow. He said it's not the sound of clapping that should matter, it's whether the action was just, honest, and rooted in virtue. That's the real reward. Carl Jung put it another way when he said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." Real work, the kind that matters, often happens in silence, in the struggle, in the private moments with no applause, no recognition, and no immediate reward. That's where integrity lives. Socrates challenged people not just to seek truth, but to detach from approval. He didn't bend to the crowd. He focused on the questions that stirred the soul, not the ones that pleased the audience. And for that, he was mocked. But also for that, he endured. Aristotle believed that excellence is a habit, not an outcome. It's in the doing, the effort, the craftsmanship, not in the performance metrics or the praise that follows. So here's the reminder. Build something that lasts, not something that trends. Pour your energy into the work itself, not the response to it. Respect the process, refine your craft, and let the clapping fade into the background. That's where real impact begins. 10. Choose who you listen to. Not every opinion should have a key to your mind, and yet we often act like anyone with a voice deserves space in our thoughts. The truth is, some voices should be welcomed, others filtered out completely. It's not about arrogance, it's about discernment. The Stoics weren't indifferent to all feedback, they just believed in quality over quantity. Marcus Aurelius listened closely to his teachers, his mentors, his generals. He valued the insights of those who lived by principle and had earned his respect. But the noise of the crowd, the praise of the fickle, that he dismissed. Aristotle once said, "The friend of all is a friend of none." The same applies to your critics. If you try to listen to everyone, you'll end up hearing nothing clearly. That's why it's crucial to build your inner circle with intention. People who will challenge you with honesty. People who aren't afraid to tell you when you're wrong, but do it with care, not ego. Carl Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." Advice is the same. Even well-meaning suggestions can be harmful if they don't match your values or your path. So instead of collecting every opinion like it's gold, ask, do I trust this person's life, their integrity, their wisdom? Socrates believed in dialogue, but only with those who pursued truth, not status. He welcomed difficult questions, but ignored empty rhetoric. That's the mindset. You don't shut everyone out, but you choose who gets through. 11th, live in a way that deserves respect. There's something freeing about realizing you don't need to be admired to be valuable. That applause isn't a requirement for living a meaningful life, because admiration, it's not something you can control. You can't make people respect you. You can't twist their perception to match your intention. But you can focus on how you show up, on what you stand for, on how you carry yourself when no one's watching. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't chase reputation, they built character. Epictetus said, "If you want to be good, first believe that you are bad." Not in a self-loathing way, but as a reminder to always be refining, always improving. Because the point isn't to appear admirable, it's to be solid at the core. Aristotle had a phrase for this, virtue ethics. He believed that goodness wasn't a costume you put on when people are around. It was a habit, a way of life formed through action, over and over, quietly, consistently. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." That applies here. Reputation is external, it's fragile, it shifts, but your values, your internal compass, that's what holds steady when the world gets noisy or unfair. Socrates was put to death by the same city he tried to enlighten. His reputation, in the eyes of many, was damaged, but his legacy? Unshakable, because he stood for something real, even when it cost him everything. 12th, train yourself through fear. We spend so much time avoiding fear, thinking that if we just stay safe enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, it won't find us. But the Stoics believed the opposite. They leaned into discomfort. They sought it out. Not because they were fearless, but because they knew fear only grows in the dark. Step into it, though. Face it head on. Suddenly, it shrinks. Epictetus taught that the key to freedom is discipline, and part of that discipline is training the mind not to run from fear, but to meet it with calm and clarity. That's what exposure is. It's choosing again and again to step into situations that scare you, not recklessly, but intentionally. Controlled discomfort, deliberate practice. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." That's fear in a nutshell. The more you dodge it, the bigger it becomes in your mind. But when you walk straight into it, send that email, speak in that room, share your work, something powerful happens. You don't just survive the moment, you expand because of it. Plato believed that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the mastery of it. And mastery takes practice, representatives. You don't become confident by waiting to feel ready. You become confident by doing the thing before you're ready, again and again, until your nervous system learns, "Hey, I didn't die, I can handle this." Aristotle taught that all virtues are built through action. You become brave by acting bravely, even if it starts with trembling hands and a racing heart. That's how strength is forged. So here's the challenge. Don't wait to feel fearless. Pick the thing you're afraid to do and do it in small doses. Ask the uncomfortable question. Publish the messy draft. Speak up even if your voice shakes. That's not failure, that's training. In the end, the only approval you ever truly need is your own. The Stoics knew that peace comes not from applause, but from alignment with your values, your purpose, and your truth. So keep walking your path. Keep showing up as the real you, even when it's hard. If today's message hit home, there's another video waiting for you that'll take this journey even deeper. You'll see it on the screen now, just one more step forward. Thanks for being here and for being a part of Stoic Journal. Until next time, keep your mind steady, your heart clear, and your focus where it truly matters. We'll see you soon.